Step 1 tells me that I need to machine stitch 1 inch down from the top of my upper edge of pocket 1, which is this piece here. So I can just use those measurements on my machine if I have that 1 inch measurement, and I can just use that and sew right along that edge, which is what I will be doing. On my machine here, I have my different markings, and the very last line here, that is going to be my 1 inch line. So that is where I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric with, and as long as I stay even with that, I should have a 1 inch stitching all the way across my pocket. Now that I have that 1 inch stitch line there, I'm going to turn it over to the wrong side of the fabric, and I'm just going to fold over so that this raw edge here meets that stitch line, and I am going to press my fabric. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to fold it one more time, this time so that the top of the pocket, my stitching is right at the top of that pocket, and then I am going to press it again. And then I'm going to take this over to my machine and I'm going to do a based stitch. Now a base stitch is going to be where I set my machine stitch to a long stitch, so as long as it goes. I think that's a 5 on my machine. And I'm not going to back stitch it because it's just a stitch to hold in place, and it can be easily removed later on. Okay, so I am going to take you over to my machine and I'll kind of show you how I set it up. Okay, so I have my needle in my fabric there right along that edge, and that is where I'm going to do my base stitch. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my machine setting. So I'm still going to stick with my straight stitch, but I am going to change my length here, and I am going to move that all the way up until I hit a 5. So you might have to turn your dial on your machine. However you do that, you're going to turn your length all the way up, but leave everything else the same, and again, you're not going to back stitch this stitch. Okay, so this is what it's looking like. It's a really long stitch, and again, I did it just on that very bottom edge of kind of that seam there. Okay, so now I'm back at my machine and I need to move that length back down. So I am just going to set it back down to where it was, which is a 2.4 for me usually. And then I am going to go ahead and I am going to use my 3/8 inch seam, and I'm just going to do a top stitch. So I'm going to do that right along the right side of my fabric, and I'm going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance here for that. For those of you that have metric measurements on your machine, you're going to use the 1 centimeter measurement on your machine. Okay, so now I have both my top stitch and my base stitch, and I did trim my threads on just my top stitch, but I still have my threads nice and long for my base stitch. And the reason I have that is because then it makes it easier to pull out, which is what I'm going to do now, because I no longer need that base stitch to hold that piece of fabric in place. So I'm just going to take and grab one of the 2 strings on my end here, and I'm going to just give it a nice little tug, and it'll just kind of easily pull right out. Once I have one of them removed, I can just kind of pull the other one off, and there I have my base stitch all removed. Okay, so now I am going to go ahead and I'm going to use a 5/8 inch seam allowance all around the rest of the pocket. For those of you that have a metric measuring machine, you're going to use a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and you're not going to pivot at your corners. You're going to go from one edge to the other, and you're going to do each edge individually. You won't have to do this top edge that we've already stitched, and I'll go ahead and I'll do it, and then I'll show you. Just in case you don't understand what I mean, but when I say you don't have to pivot. Okay, so here I have that 5/8 inch seam stitching all the way around. So I'll just zoom in here on a corner so you can kind of see. So I just went from one edge all the way to the other edge, and then I did one side, started here and went all the way off to the side. So I didn't pivot here at the intersection. I did each side individually. So now I'm going to press my corners here. So I am just going to fold them over and press right where those 2 stitches intersect. And I'm going to do that for each corner at the bottom of my pocket here. And now I'm just going to take where I trimmed, or where I pressed, and I'm going to trim so that I just have about 1/4 of an inch of fabric remaining there along each corner. So you can see that I trimmed that there. And now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to fold over right along that. So my stitching there is right along the edge of my fold. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press again. After you have those sides all ironed in so that those stitching lines are right on the sides there, your pocket is constructed. So this is what it's going to look like. And now you're ready to place it on your apron. So that's what we will be doing next. Okay, so you probably won't be able to see on the video where my placement lines are, but I have some markings. So this is kind of the top of where my pocket markings are. These are kind of the corners, and this is the bottom center corner here. So I can see it where I am at, and as long as you can see where your placement lines are, that's gonna be the most important part. So you're gonna kind of match up your pocket with those placement lines on your apron. And you're just gonna pin that in place. Okay, then once that is pinned in place here, you are just going to go ahead and you are going to stitch along the sides and the bottom. You're obviously not going to sew along the top because you want it to be a functioning pocket. And you're going to do that with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Those of you with a metric machine, it's going to be a 1 centimeter seam allowance. So again, the sides and the bottom, but not the top, at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You also want to make sure that you are back stitching at the top, as always, when you start and finish. But really, if you want this to be a functioning pocket especially, it's not going to be able to hold anything if you do not remember to back stitch.